Alright, welcome back to video 10, You Are Gods. This is the 144,000 project, Anglo-Israel, and then here are our videos at Rev 9 video. Now, we left off at Genesis, in chapter 31. We're going to start with chapter 32. Now, the interesting thing is, there's multiple mentions of this angel. So this is, again, continuation of the same entity. It's the one that he called the house of God. Now and it says, in mine it says Jacob met the angel at this place he called the encampment or witness heap, which is where he made this oath, in other words, to Laban. And he's just following, he's making an agreement not to attack any of Laban's family, and that they won't attack any of Jacob's family. So that's a good oath between families, in other words. It's a good thing to do. So he made that agreement before this angel, and this angel appears in 32. Now, some say angels, plural, because then I think they're just confused because it says Jacob sent messengers, which is same concept. Obviously, I don't think he sent angels to his brother. He sent messengers, which were those of his household, and we can see that where he breaks his whole little train of people here up into multiple groups. So they said, angels plural, but I think it's just this one angel, which he also talks to in verse 10, which we're going to get to here in a second. So it's clearly only one angel as you go through chapter 32. There's only one angel, so I think that was a mistake in the King James. And Jacob makes this prayer in verse 9 through 12, asked to be shielded from harm by his brother Esau. So the prophecies, previous prophecies of the Christ to him will be fulfilled. Jacob is his king. So that's Christ the shield who's giving him this great reward that was promised to him and his forefathers, which we've already seen that's a connection. So, he just gives you this prayer where he quotes this angel that had spoke to him before, return to the land of your birth. I will be good to you. In other words, I'll shield you. I'll give you this reward. I'll give you these offspring, blah, blah, blah. So those are the prophecies. So he's just asking for the prophecies from the angels already promised to him. Okay. And that his posterity will be like the sand of the sea. So he's just quoting all these prophecies which started from Abraham in reality. And he said, now this is past to me, and if you'll be with me and shield me, and all this will come about. And of course, which is what Christ has to do to make his own prophecies come true. He has to work in making that happen. So then when you get down to 24 to 32 then, so he passes some of them over the brook, it says, who were with him, and then it says Jacob was left alone. It said a man wrestled with him until the departure of darkness, until it became dark. He saw departure of darkness till morning. He saw, however, that he was not equal to him, so he touched him in the hollow of the thigh. So it's the angel says that he's not equal to the person he's struggling with, which is Jacob. That's the context. And the angel struck him in the thigh. Okay. While wrestling, and then he says, release me, for the darkness is going. In other words, he's telling Jacob to release the angel. So, okay. That's the context. So he says, but Jacob replies, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Well, okay. He's afraid for his life that his brother might kill him, but he's already prayed that all these prophecies will be fulfilled to him as this angel he's already spoke to. So now he's speaking to him again and wrestling with him, and he said, Jacob, oh okay, then he answered, what is your name? asking Jacob. He says, Jacob. When he responded, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have wrestled with an angel as with men, and have been equal to it. So it started out saying it was a man at the beginning. Then it says it's an angel, or a divine angel, and you've been equal to this angel. So he had to, in other words, make him lame on one leg, because he was more powerful than the angel. That's kind of what he's trying to say. But in reality, changes his name to Israel. How many angels can just change your name to power with God? So for sure, power with God then means this angel isn't the same level of God. Again, it has to be Christ, the angel he's struggling with. The angel says, why did he ask my name? But he then blessed him. When he asked the angel, in other words, Jacob consequently called the name of that place, I don't know how to pronounce it, Peniel. That is God's face. So now he calls the angel in the place where he struggled with the angel God's face. So he's struggling with the angel, he calls God. The God's able to change his name to power with God, or prevailing with God, which is what Israel means, and that is the concept, the whole concept of you are gods. Is that Jacob's offspring, which he's already been prophesied to have, which becomes this commonwealth and this great nation, will have power with God, which means that God will do things for them, shield them from harm, fight for them, and be their king. That's the concept. And that could only make sense if those were a Christian nation and a Christian commonwealth of nations, as we see as we go along. There's no other blessing it could be, except they'll be Christian. Alright. God's face, for I have seen God face to face and preserved my life. Okay, so he's saying he's seen this angel face to face, and he says he's seen God face to face. But we know it was a man, so it's not, it's God in the manifestation of Christ. I mean, you can look at it however you want. But we know we have a Creator, then we have a Son who was sent here for a purpose, and then we have the Spirit who was here for a purpose within prophecy. So look at it however you want. But, you know, churches say, well, there's three, Trinity. So this part then would be the angel, which would be Christ. Angel calls himself God. Angel changes his name. That's Christ. And he says he's seen God face to face when he saw this angel face to face and struggled with him. So again, he's saying, I've seen Christ face to face. But it's the same entity that he saw when he saw the angels going up and down Jacob's ladder, with the angel at the top of the ladder. So that's Christ, the Son of God, he saw at the top of the ladder, King of Kings. Not necessarily looking at the Creator, although we can agree they're all three one entity in that essence. Alright, so it reads slightly different depending on your Bible. It also mentions, and I didn't put it on here, no one could look on the face of God and live, which is why Moses was hidden in the cliff of the rock when he was revealed and he saw the back. Well, still, whether he's looking at Christ or looking at the Creator, you can look at it however you want. So, there's no reason to think that we've changed from the King of Righteousness to the Father or the Creator. Since he saw him face to face, I'd say that's evidence he's speaking to Christ. The same King of Righteousness that spoke to Abraham, promised to be his exceeding great reward, which I said can't be a man, can't be a king, a physical man of any type making that promise in Genesis 15:1. It can only be Christ making that type of promise. So he appealed to Christ as shield for help, okay, and to fulfill these prophecies. So it can't be a man he's appealing to. Does just any angel have authority to change a person's name to power with God or prevailing with God? Excuse me. He calls that location God's face. The text indicates he prevailed with the angel, and that's why he was struck in the leg. Only angel who could be referred to as God is Christ. The thought of the Creator God would let him prevail over him in any manner is simply not a tenable argument. Because this angel, in a sense, really, I think, allowed him to prevail. So that's, yeah, I don't know how to explain that. I mean, come on. Israel's power with God, so he gave him that power. Obviously he allowed Jacob to prevail in the struggle so that he could give him this blessing, which was the whole concept of you are God's, Jacob's offspring being, having this connection to God. That's why they're called gods. That way God, Christ, the Spirit all works within the family of Jacob's 12 tribes, if you want to look at it that way, the Israelites. However, you still have to accept Christ, and that's the concept. Some accept Christ, some don't accept Christ. So now today we've got this whole nation over here of people who say, oh, we're Israelites, therefore, we're waiting on this God to come back and rescue us, but they've rejected Christ, and so Christ has already said, well, if you reject me, I'll reject you, I'll take you out of the book of life. Half the Bible covers that concept throughout Psalms and Isaiah. I mean, what else are you going to say? The prophecies are all about those of Israel who accept Christ versus those of Israel who reject Christ, which is what we got the beginning, blessings and curses. Blessings for follow his law, cursings for not. The whole Bible is about that. But only as it applies to the 12 tribes, because only the 12 tribes have this power with God, where God does things for them, shields them from harm, fights for them, does these things for them. This is the only group of people we see throughout Scripture. There is no other group of people in Scripture that have power with God. It's just crazy to say, go up to the New Testament and say, oh, all these prophecies are gone, all of these prophecies. Oh, but well, maybe there's some group of people that will, eventually turn to God or whatever. When you got this whole group of people over here, these white Anglo-Saxon people, who from the day of Christ, when he left, 2,000 years have been doing what Christ told them to do. So why would these other group of people come in and just step in and start doing all the things that fulfill the prophecies to the 12 tribes, unless they were the 12 tribes? They don't want to admit it because this other group of people have already stepped in and said, no, we're the 12 tribes. And of course, we know, well, some people do know what's all kinds of things they've done. So from there, well, we've got, some odds and ends you can look at here. 33 called on God, the God of Israel. That's 33:20, for example. And then there was this terror. Okay, well, that's here. There's this terror, built an altar to the God. This terror from God. Again, this is Christ, the rock, or Christ, the shield. And in mine, it uses the word hornet. Yeah, here you go. And it does use, okay, the terror was Christ, also called the hornet in Deuteronomy. Now, if you look up in Strong's, you'll find the hornet used up here in Deuteronomy and Joshua, but actually that's this terror with God. So that's, mine actually says a terror, or a hornet, back here in Genesis. Alright, and at the beginning of 35, so I said, okay, 1 through 8. Good. So, the point was they had to leave Shechem, because this is after their sister got raped, and we all know they went in and killed all these people that were responsible for that. Then 35, God afterwards said to Jacob, rise, go to Bethel, reside, make an altar there to the God who appeared to you in your flight from your brother Esau. Well, that God was Christ then, so he's telling him to make this altar to Bethel, to the house of God, right? Go to the house of God, make an altar to the same God, right? So, that's Christ. So then Jacob says, throw away any of the strange gods, purify yourselves, change your clothing. We will go to Bethel. I'll build an altar to the God who pitied me in the day of my distress. That's with Esau. And was with me in that journey that I went, and shielded me, in other words. So that's 35:3. So then they gave to Jacob all the strange gods, the earrings. Jacob buried them under the oath. Then they marched in a terror from God. Christ the hornet was among their neighbors. They did not pursue after the sons of Jacob, which had just killed the king and the prince and all that for raping their sister. So, here again, Jacob came to Luz, and over here it spells it L-U-Z, where over there before it spelled it L-O-Z or whatever. And it says it is Bethel and his people with him. He built the altar and called the house of God Bethel, which he was just told to do. For there God appeared to him in his flight from the presence of his brother. So again, right back to where he was, or referring to where he was, I should say. But Deborah, the nurse of Rebekah, died. Okay. Then verse 9, God also appeared another time to Jacob. So that'll start with the next one. Down here, that's 9. So we went 1 through 8. Now, we've also got Exodus 15:16. So let's look at that cross-reference about this terror for God. Yeah, so starting in 14, the nations hearing it trembled. And, this is called the Song of Moses. This should start at the beginning of 15. It's called the Song of Moses. Song to the ever-living, right? And if you look through there, the Lord is a warrior, verse 3. So that's Christ the rock right there. He overwhelmed Pharaoh's cars. Okay, talking about his chariots and his force in the sea. So it's talking about all these things that Christ did for them, bringing them out of Egypt. So he's talking about Christ the shield, Christ the rock, which Christ the rock is who, fights for you. Okay. And then you get down to verse 11. Who is like to the Lord among gods? Who is like him in his holy splendor, brightness, honor, powerful acts? Okay, so that's Christ doing all these powerful acts. You extend your hand, the earth was shaken, you led in your love this people redeemed. So they redeemed them, which is the idea of saving them, not necessarily redemption at the end time. Use the term redeemed in that concept of saving them from harm. I'll bring in your might to your holy home. The nations hearing it tremble. Terror seized on Philistines' men. The chiefs of Edom were also in terror. The princes of Moab shook in their fear. So, they all knew what happened. The whole world at that time knew what happened when the Christ brought these people out of the Egyptian captivity. We're still in 15. The people of Canaan dissolved like a cloud. Dread and terror fell upon them. Their mighty power, they stood like a stone till your people passed over, and your race had passed out redeemed. Whom you brought and fixed as your own on your hill, the place you had chosen for your work, to the temple your hands had made. So, alright. That continues on. So also, let's look at if you read more in here, it's about the rock of Horeb and then how he gave them food. Alright, so we go up to 23:27. I will send my terror before your face and will terrify every nation when you arrive at them. So there's Christ the shield, Christ the rock, sends his terror. So Christ goes out and makes a terror and just works for you. You don't even know what he's doing. And that's what he does. But he does that for his people, the gods, the people he calls gods, who are his people, who he fights for, who call on him to do things for them. So you have to first kind of understand who he is, and you have to call on Christ the shield, Christ the rock when you need help from him. And Christ is your king, the same king from Abraham. If you're not calling on Christ from Abraham and saying, hey, these are my forefathers, and I want you to help me and protect me the same as you did for my forefathers according to the promise you made to Abraham. If you don't say that, hey, this is me, I'm part of this promise, then why should he act for you, you see? I mean, I'm just giving you an example. You should say that, hey, I'm part of this promise. Because he can't break his promise. But, you have to follow his law and do what he says. Of course, if you call on him, you believe on him. But the point is, you're still required to follow his law, repent when you violate his law and that kind of thing. And don't intend to do any harm to others, and especially not those of your same kindred people. Okay. Then he'll send, I'll make all your enemies turn their back to you, and I will send the destroyer, or the hornet, before you, and drive out the Hittites, Hivites, Canaanites, blah, blah, blah. Okay. He says, I won't drive them out. In other words, not going to kill them, just boom. You shall not make a treaty with them. That's verse 32. Or a covenant with their gods. They shall not reside in your land, for fear they would cause you to sin, so that you would serve their gods, for I am the ever-living you reverence. Alright. So then he wrote down all the commands. That's 24:4 and so forth. Alright, so let's go up 34:24. Okay, so all your eldest sons you shall redeem, for you shall not see my presence empty-handed. So that's about verse 20. You shall labor 6 days, but on the 7th you shall cease from plowing and rest and harvest. Okay, rest on the 7th day. Also you shall make a festival of rest for yourselves at the first fruits of the wheat harvest, and a festival at the completion of the solar circuit of the year. So you're laying out these festivals 3 times a year. All your men shall appear before the presence of the Lord. Yeah, well, you should still do that. Get together, teach his word, what it's all about, who he is, and this covenant back to Abraham. For I will drive out all the heathen before you. That's verse 24. And will extend your boundaries. Therefore no man of your land shall neglect to go up 3 times a year to see the presence of God. Right? Okay. Well, should still be doing that. And then he gets into the Passover, first fruits of your field. Write these commands. I've made a covenant with you and with Israel. Again, that's the concept of you are gods. The covenant is only made Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then Israel. Not made with Esau. It's not made with any other group, any other family. Never changed to another family. If there did, then you should be able to just show us this prophecy of where it was going to be taken from Israel and just giving it to these white Anglo-Saxon people, because those are the only people anybody can point to. I mean, who else are you going to point to in the last 2,000 years that went out all over the world, sent missionaries, wrote his Bible down, broke it into books, and printed it, and then made all these different printings with all different languages and sent those out to all these people so everybody else could read it. And whether we said, oh, it applies to you or not, the point is, it wasn't, you know, wasn't anyone else. It was only the white Anglo-Saxon people that did all that. So you can't say someone else did it. Okay? Let's look at Deuteronomy 11:35. Here again he's talking about Christ as shield. And 11 just starts out, carefully regard his laws, decrees, commands. For you have not children who have not known about his law and have not seen the corrections of God, his greatness, his strong hand, directing arm, his wonders, and the events that he effected in the midst of Egypt upon Pharaoh, all his country, what he did to the army. So, what he did then, that's Christ, you know, doing all these things to the Egyptians. And he tells you the sea, and just earth opened her mouth, and just go on. So he's saying he did all these things, right? Of course we know he did it all, and that's why everybody feared him. That's why there was a terror on everyone. Now, I should mention in 10 here, 14, let's look back at 10:14. Look, the heavens and the heaven of the heavens, the earth and all it contains belong to the ever-living God, yet your ever-living chose to love your fathers. And he has selected their race after them from all the peoples as at this day. Again, ye are gods, your family was selected. Again, it says it's the God of gods, almighty of almighties, the great God, the powerful, and the enlightener. He will not regard appearance or take bribes. He does justice, loves to give bread and clothes to the stranger. Okay? So therefore you should help people. If you have food to give people, you should help it. Call on Christ to take care of problems. Revelations your eyes saw. It's verse 21. It goes back into what happened in Egypt. Okay. 11:35 then. Let me get up to there. And of course it's talking about curses and blessings. Curses if you don't follow God's law. Again. 11, did I say 11:35? It's not good. Verse. Let me look. Sometimes mine. Yeah. I just have to check the King James for sure. It ends at 32, not 35. I did say 11:35, so that's not right. 12:35, so it's not 5. Alright, well, I'm not sure. Another one I have to correct here. And I don't see, it's all about blessings and curses. We were looking for the terror. It's not in 11:35. So, in the wrong spot. Let's see it in 12. So, not sure. Something I'll have to go back and fix. Alright, Joshua then. 2:9 and 5:1. Let's go look at that. Okay, 2:5. Oh, 2:9. Okay. I know that the ever-living will give this country to you because a terror has fallen upon us, and all the population of our land will melt away before you. For we have heard how the ever-living caused the waters of the Red Sea to dry up, when you came out from Egypt. Yeah. So the whole land, everybody knew about it and heard about these things. All these kings, their hearts melt. The spirit of man will never rise up against you. And then she knows, because she says, for the ever-living God is God in heaven above and on the earth beneath. Therefore now listen, I pray, to me. When your ever-living God shows favor to you, shall also show favor to my father's family. Alright, well, how did she know about God and regard this God? It's really speaking about all the things Christ did for them and all that. But she knew about it. She revered him. So, there you go. She was saved from harm when they did come and capture. Now, 5:1. All the kings of the Amorites beyond the Jordan, towards the west, all the kings of the Canaanites who were among the sea, heard how the ever-living had caused the waters of the Jordan to dry before the children of Israel until they passed over. Their hearts melted. There was no spirit left before the children of Israel. Okay. That's Christ going before them, making this terror. So he sent out this knowledge of all these events about his people ahead of them. So it made everybody terrified. And they just melted before them, ran away or whatever, or they fought against him and died. 1 Samuel 14:13. Okay, she's talking about Jonathan, and there was so there was an earthquake and a divine terror. That's what it means. Divine terror usually is referring to Christ, in other words. So Saul and Jonathan in this war perceived the rumbling with horror and staggered as if they were in a dream. So it's really this earthquake that he's talking about. It says, Saul, muster and discern who has gone from us. In other words, there was the ark of God with Israel. Okay. Approach the ark of God. Priests came from the camp of the Philistine, and it rolled and rolled and raged. And Saul said to the priest, take away your hand. Saul and all the force who were with him cheered in advance. Saw the sword of each was against his companion. Okay, well there's Christ the rock. When the people are each fighting themselves, he sends this terror, this confusion into the camp. Same thing he did with Gideon. Then they basically kill themselves, kill each other, in other words. So some of the Hebrews served with the Philistines, mutinied, joined with the Israelites. Okay. Ever-living rescued Israel. Alright, that's verse 22, 23 right there. So there you go. Christ the rock helped them in battle. Of course, we know other places where he killed people and so forth, killed the soldiers. God says to Jacob, go to Bethel, build an altar. So now we're back to Genesis 35, 1 through 8. So, the terror to the God, the altar called the house of God, for there is where God appeared to him. All connects to the previous events back to Jacob's pillar stone. So I've already established he was talking to Christ, this angel that he fought against, called a man, who the angel said he was God, not the creator, El or Elohim. Okay, so the terror was Christ, also called the hornet. Oh, there's another Joshua. Okay, called the hornet in Deuteronomy 7. Well, I wonder if I looked at Deuteronomy 7 because, yeah, Alright, here I got it. Yeah. Deuteronomy 7, 20, 24. Okay. Alright, so this is when they oh, yeah. Deuteronomy 7. So if you look back, he's telling you don't marry with these other races. And of course, the races he's talking about are groups of people right at the beginning of chapter 7, verse 1. Canaanites, Amorites, Jebusites, Hivites, blah, blah, blah. 7 nations more numerous and stronger than yourselves, whom the ever-living God will deliver up before you. So there's Christ the rock saying, I'll deliver, even though these nations are stronger than you, I'll deliver these nations to you. So he'll fight for you. And will defeat them, destroy them, make no treaty with them, do not pity. So this is 7:2. Do not marry with them. Give not your daughter to a son, nor take his daughter for your son. Oh, wait a minute. And then talk about Canaanites and Hivites and Hittites and Jebusites. Yeah. Isn't that who Esau married then? In with Canaanites, Hivites, so on. Alright. So here again he says, don't marry them, nor take the daughters, because it will turn your heart from following me. You will serve other gods. And that was the whole problem with who Esau married. They didn't like his choice. Jacob didn't do that. Okay, so the anger of the ever-living will burn against you. So that's what happened with Esau. The anger of the ever-living burned against him for doing marrying within these families and creating offspring from these other families, which would turn him from God. So he did himself in by his choices. You shall throw down their altars, break their columns, that's verse 5, smash their shrines, because you are a people, verse 6, devoted to your ever-living God. In other words, you are gods, because I will fight and I will do all these things for you. That's why I call you gods. This family, the ever-living God, chose you to be a people for himself, separated from all other peoples who are upon the face of the earth. Has he not increased you more than all the peoples? Ever-living did not unite with you because you were the most numerous, but chose you when you were the least of all peoples. And the ever-living loved you because of keeping the oath which he swore to his fathers. Again, all family. Therefore, the ever-living brought you out, freed you from the house of bondage in Egypt. The ever-living's God faithfully keeps his covenant. So anytime you appeal to Christ, you should appeal to Christ because of this covenant. If you act like, well, I'm not part of the covenant, but I want you to do these things for you, that doesn't work. And shows favor to those who love him and regard his commands. So you still have to follow his law. And he does that for 1,000 generations, but repays his enemies, those who hate him, to their face, by destroying them. It's Christ the rock. So Christ acts for these people who follow his law and call on him according to the covenant. But if you're not according to the covenant, if you hate him or whatever, you attack people of this covenant, well, he shields people of this covenant. He fights for people of this covenant. That's why he calls them gods. Because he doesn't promise this to anybody else. He only promises it to this one family of people. And Esau was excluded, as it says, because he married within these other races. That's what it says right here. Therefore, preserve the commandments, constitutions, decrees, and practice them. For there will be a reward if you listen to these decrees and preserve and practice them. Right. You'll have that exceeding great reward, but not if you violate his law and ignore, this covenant. The ever-living God will keep the covenant. We're in verse 12. And the favor which he promised to your fathers, and will love you and bless you and increase the fruit of your body, children, and the fruit of your ground, your corn, your grapes. So there's the fruit in two different contexts. The fruit of your body is children, the fruit of your grounds, your corn, your grapes, your oil, your cattle shall breed, your sheep bring. So you'll have sheep, you'll have animals, which he promised to your fathers to give you. So even the increase in your children is a promise, and the increase in your food is a promise. Food, animals, and so forth. That's all a promise. Okay. Well, there it is. But it's promised, again, to your fathers. And then down to you. It's not promised to the world. It's not promised to just anyone that calls on Christ. Although anyone that calls on Christ, as we saw as the innkeeper, just previous, we just read, they can also obtain blessings, but it's not to their family. So they're not promised this redemption through Christ to be brought back into the kingdom of God and all these kinds of things. They're not promised to be a royal priesthood, which is the real promise here that we're getting to in Exodus 19:6, in other words, which follows all through Scripture. They're not promising that. They're just promising that you appeal to God, He'll do things for you. He'll redeem you from harm. He'll do different things, but only to the 12 tribes is He really given this family these promises. Okay. It says you won't be sterile, which of course He made this Abimelech and his family sterile. Remember. Okay. Turn the disease and sicknesses away from you. Put them on all who hate you. Okay. So they're saying, well, these nations are more numerous than us. He says, well, don't fear that, because He'll fight for you and He'll do these things. This is verse 17. Just read on down. God also sent upon them a fever to destroy the remnants who hide themselves from you. That's 20. So that's a hornet. You shall not be pursued by them. Again, same idea we read before about the hornet. God will drive these nations out little by little, but not too quickly. God will displace them before He dissolve with much confusion until they perish. So they'll be confused about what to do, right? So that's what Christ does. He goes in, He's a terror or a hornet, and then He confuses them. He makes them fight each other until they kill each other, and that's what His promise to the 12 tribes. It's not a promise to everyone. Obviously, it can't be a promise to everyone. For one thing, I mean. Okay, so let's go to Joshua 24:12. So what I got there? Joshua. All right. So we're 24. Talk to the nations of Israel, chiefs, judges, registrars, stationed before the ever-living. Yeah, of course they have the justice system. Then 2, thus says the ever-living, the God of Israel, your ancestors dwelt between the river, father of Abraham, and the father of Nahor, where they served other gods. But I took Abraham from the other side of the river, caused him to travel. I held back his race, yet gave him Isaac. I also gave Isaac, Jacob, and Esau, and gave to Esau Mount Seir to reign over, but caused Jacob and his sons to descend to Egypt. Yes, that was according to a promise to Abraham, or a vision, prophecy in chapter 15. What was it? 15:13 of Genesis, I think. Afterwards sent Moses. So yeah, he says right here, well, so he chose. So he did all this. He chose Abraham, chose all these things. He's basically saying, I did all this for this race of Abraham. I sent Moses, Aaron, struck the Egyptians. Now I split the Sea of Weeds, and I killed all these Egyptians, and so everybody saw all these kinds of things, right? Then Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab, arose and made war with Israel. That's verse 9. I wasn't willing to listen to them. Then you crossed the Jordan, came to Jericho. I made war with you. I gave them into your power and sent the hornet in advance. So that's Christ the rock in advance, right there, verse 12. Drove out the kings before you, not with your sword, nor with your bow, and gave you a country you had not reclaimed, and towns you had not built, vineyards and olive groves you have not planted. You hated them, so now look to the ever-living and serve Him with sincerity and truth. The gods your ancestors served over the river and among Egypt, turn away from them, serve the ever-living. However, And this, I like this. But if it's, verse 15, if it's hateful in your sight to serve the ever-living, choose for yourself whom you will serve. Well, there you go. It just tells you right there, you can choose. If you don't want to choose the ever-living, He brought you out of Egypt and you saw all those things He did for you, and you know, you don't want to listen to His voice, and this great fire that came down on Sinai. Well, they said, you know, send us a prophet. We've already read that. And He says, okay, well, that sounds good. I will do that. So that's the whole idea of the prophet that Moses spoke about. There you go. But He says, choose whichever one. So, if you dismiss Christ, which they did when Christ come, and before you got there, there were all these prophecies in the Old Testament about these people who would reject Christ because they didn't want Christ. They liked the money and the power and all the things they basically got from God, got from Christ. So they liked all the benefits they got from being part of Israel, and reveled in their luxury and dominating over their people as these nobles and elders and whatever, and the priests and everything else. They just liked all the accolades that people gave to them because they were rich and powerful and they were in these nice positions, you know. Just like the same thing, you know, people give honor to the president and all these people in Congress and judges, and while they're stealing from you and destroying everything that your nation was built on. Yeah. Same thing. Right there. I and my family will serve the ever-living. There you go. Let it be a curse for us to forsake the ever-living or serve other gods. Well, yeah, that's what it is. Talks about guarding. There's Christ the shield right there in verse 17. Guarding in the way we traveled and all the nations we passed through, right? Ever-living driven out the peoples and the Amorites who occupied the country before. Therefore we will serve the ever-living, for He's our God. It's talking about Christ. This rock, Christ the stone, Christ the shield. All right. And then, 22, and Joshua said to the people, you are witnesses that you have chosen the ever-living to serve Him. And they said, we are witnesses. And that's another concept of the two witnesses. The two empires who witnessed for Christ said they did. He'll judge the ones that didn't do a very good job of that, I guess, and rejected Christ and reveled in their luxury and their dominance over their kindred and others, going out making perpetual war, using the benefits of your country to dominate over all the other countries on earth. All we've got to do is teach all this stuff in church, saying, hey, you know, there's no benefit in these wars. Congress hasn't declared a war, so why are you going to war? You got to declare the war first, that's what you're supposed to do? We're not doing that. But people are still going to fight the wars. I guess we need to understand some of that kind of stuff, so let's go on. We'll come back on 35, 9 to 15, about this multitude of nations. Now I've completely revamped this. There's a company of nations, there's a commonwealth, and there's a multitude of nations, all the same concept, but I looked up all those cross-references there and kind of spiffed that up a little bit, so we'll come back with 11, video 11. Thank you.